Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Whether you are a sales professional, not in sales but interested in helping people solve problems, or a founder CEO who is looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and we're here with Mike Simmons, the founder of Catalyst Sale. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Jody.
All right, Mike, we're going to continue our series of tactics for sales. This is an ongoing piece we've been doing for a little while now, and the topic this time is communication. So, Mike, get us out of the gate on communication.
This is a theme that's come up a couple of times lately, and it's amazing how much we struggle with communication. And one thing that I like to do is just look in the mirror as a reminder and remind myself that I've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, probably for a reason. And I know a lot of people have said that, and I don't even know where the quote originated from as it relates to that. But I'm just wondering why we, as a human race or group of sales professionals or a group of folks who are trying to support learning inside organizations, or a group of folks who are trying to get a product out in the market, why do we struggle with communication?
Well, why do you think we do? You've been around so many sales professionals, some that have years of experience and some that are brand new. Do you think communication is an ongoing issue, or when you have enough experience, do you get better at it?
Well, we edit the podcast. And when I listen to myself speak in an environment where it's not edited, I realize how many times I say, So I think we can always get better. I think there's always an opportunity for improvement. There are things that we continue to work on. And this practice of putting a podcast out in public has helped me when I listen to the unedited versions of it. Maybe, lately we've started to transition where I'm doing the interviews on my own and we're putting those out as a separate podcast, and you're joining as the host when we do these one-on-one discussions. But I think we can absolutely improve. I don't think we ever get to a point where we perfect it. There are some great communicators out there. There are some great orators out there. Yeah, I think as individuals, we can always get better. I think the reason why we struggle with it is many of us, especially in the sales profession, we hear the idea of you've got to sell. And there are some people who think, well, if I'm selling, what I'm doing is I'm trying to convince somebody of something, or I'm trying to create a high level of influence. And the way that I can create that high level of influence, or the way that I can convince someone to take action, is by talking and describing all of the features and functionality and benefits and reasons why you'd want to do things. Well, think of any time that you've been involved in a situation where someone's trying to change your behavior. How often do you change that behavior because someone is saying something to you and they've convinced you that it's time to change, versus the number of times that you've changed that behavior because you've made your own internal decision based on a question that might have come up, or something that might have provoked an additional thought?
Well, you give me a couple of thoughts here. One, I want to back up to what you were saying about the podcast and that you get to hear yourself in the unedited versions. That's an advantage, I think, that you have, that you get to hear yourself communicate and say, okay, this is what I've done where I can do better. How can we take something like that and apply it to what we're doing in sales?
Well, think about the technology that you have in front of you. I mean, we recently had Brian Fanzo on as one of the guests, and he was talking about one way to improve your comfort level in using video as a medium to communicate is to start doing more FaceTime videos with your family. Start to realize, where do you put your eyes? How are you communicating a message? How does it change in that individual medium? Well, we've got these amazing devices. Most of us have them in our hand all the time, and you might be playing Candy Crush or Tetris or whatever the latest game is, as I date myself. But you can take that device, you can record a message that you're looking to convey, and you can listen back to that recorded message that you're interested in conveying and start to see, are there ways that I can clarify my message or clarify the way that I'm communicating? Now, I know that this shifted gears a little bit because now we're talking about the communication, the act of conveying a message. On the other side, things that you can do, record role play sessions with other members of your team where you are creating a selling environment or a scenario where you're trying to gather information in the form of an interview out of a subject matter expert, record those in a tool like Zoom. And we use Zoom to record the podcast, but record those in a tool like Zoom and start to see in that instance where you're interviewing someone, when you're gathering information, when you're getting the context from folks, how much of the time are you spending talking versus listening? How do your questions build based on the information that they share with you? Or are you going through this scripted list of questions that all of a sudden feel like an interrogation or the gauntlet of 20 questions, and you're not demonstrating that you actually understood or heard the point that your customer is trying to convey or the person on the other end is trying to convey? That doesn't mean that you shouldn't still have guideposts that are in place relative to your call plan and things that you want to accomplish and ways that you want to steer the conversation. But a great way to demonstrate that you're actually listening to somebody is to ask reflective questions based on the information that they shared with you.
That's good. I like how you took it from what we're doing and how that helps to how in sales we can find a way to do this, because not everybody has the luxury of having a podcast that we've had so many episodes, and Mike gets to go back and listen to how he did before editing, after editing, and he gets to review each time. This is how I could do better. Well, you may not have a podcast, but you have opportunity to do something similar, whether it's record yourself, whether it's work with other people to get better, to find out where your weaknesses are and how you can get better. So Mike, there's one level of communication, how we can do better with the words that we speak, with what we're doing ourselves. I've heard a quote though that I think can take us to another part of communication. And I wish I could remember who said it. If I would have thought of it beforehand, I would have looked it up. But I've heard that it was said the biggest myth about communication is that it took place at all, meaning that just because we said something, we believe our message was communicated to the other person. But that's not always true. So what can we do as a sales professional to make sure that what people hear we've said is in line with what we believe we've said?
One of the things we can do is we can ask questions to validate understanding, or that validate agreement, or validate maybe some of the assumptions or things that we've interpreted or things that we've shared. So you can ask questions to validate, and there are multiple ways to do this. And one way is to be a jerk about it and be like, hey, does that make sense? Well, how do you respond to that? If you respond, no, it doesn't make sense, am I now taking ownership as a dumb person who can't comprehend what was being shared? Another way to ask that question is, what does that make you think about? Or how has that changed your thought process around this thing that we're discussing? Or do you have examples of where you've been able to apply that in work that you're working on or in your role today, or ways that your organization has done this? So my approach to validating that information would be to ask a question. And depending on the response, I can get a better sense for items that I might need to clarify further, or items that I've done my job in conveying the message and we can move on.
Asking questions is such a good way to communicate because it helps you listen better, understand where they're coming from. Mike mentioned he has a mouth and 2 ears for a reason. Mike, when it comes to asking questions to help communicate better, is there an approach you like to take? Or I know you don't like scripts, so I don't want to say, are there certain questions that you like to ask? But give us some insight on how we can use questions better to help us communicate.
Well, I think you get back to the basic. And I know we've talked about this before on the journalist approach to sales and asking questions and, the basics. And we've also talked about it in the account planning episode, but who, what, why, where, when, how? Those are great ways to start a question that you ask. And then you can build additional context by adding some additional words. Don't try to outthink the room by sounding smarter than you are or trying to demonstrate a high level of expertise by asking a very complex question. But when someone shares something with you, you can ask a question like, how did that make you feel? Or how did that change the behavior or change the way that you think about something? But those kind of questions, based on the information that someone shares with you, are a great way for you to reinforce that you're actually listening to the person on the other end. You go through your list of 20 questions to identify business fit, or even worse, you go through your qualification process, and BANT is a component of that qualification process, that budget, authority, need, timing. You are asking questions for your own purpose with the intention not necessarily to gather information and an understanding of what the customer is thinking about, but you're asking those questions with the intention of figuring out, are they the right fit? Are they the right customer? Should I be spending time? I think one of the more common challenges that people have, especially early sales reps, is they focus on qualification as a way to qualify organizations out. I think qualification really needs to be more focused. I know we've talked about this before as well, but qualification is more focused on understanding the customer's story, which gets us back to that who, what, why, where, when, and how. And if you can use their language when you're asking follow-up questions, you'll start to build a higher level of trust and rapport, because the person on the other end is going to say, this person's listening to me. How many times have you been in that environment where someone describes something that might be insightful, and then all of a sudden the next question is in a completely different realm of reality? It almost sounds like the question came out of left field. And you see these on interviews on news channels periodically. You might see them on interviews in other environments. And in that instance, what I think, or what I take away, is that the person who is doing the interview is driving toward their own agenda rather than being focused on the person on the other end. I don't know if that hits the mark, Jody, or not.
Yeah. And doing podcasts, I get the opportunity to interview a lot of people. And I've found that it really helps to think in questions. It helps me be more curious and get to where we need to go rather than waiting for the next thing to say. Or I know this happens a lot. If you don't know what question that you have, you listen only to find out what to ask next, which means you're not really listening. You're just trying to come up with a clever question, or you'll have prepared questions. So in this case, to apply it to sales, if you have a script, maybe I'm talking to Mike and he says something that should lead to a follow-up question, but instead I go right back to the script and ask the next question on the script. Well, then you really miss an opportunity. So understanding how and when to use questions, I think, is really powerful in communication. And it really helps you move away from scripts. It helps you move away from just going through the motions of trying to get your pitch. So I think questions is a big piece of communication. Mike, is there anything else related to communication in sales that we need to know about?
Well, I think communication just in general, and you can think of this in the context of maybe your kids that you have at home, or if you don't have kids, maybe it's working with your parents or dealing with your parents at home, or it's in the context of sales, or it's in the context of onboarding a new employee, or it's in the context of any kind of interaction that you're having with another human being. Remember that there are two pieces of this thing, and there's perception that the other person on the other end is going to have, or some things that they're going to take away from that conversation that you don't have a lot of control over. You may be able to influence in the questions that you ask or in the information that you share, but you can't control their thoughts. You can't control their ideas. You can't control their response or their reaction. What you can do is you can learn from others. Are they engaged? Are they actually asking questions? Are they sharing information? Are they looking for more? And this turns into one-to-one impacts one-to-one communication as well as one-to-many communication. And when you put out blog posts, or you share things on Twitter, or you share things in general, are you actually getting some level of interaction back and some level of engagement? If you're not, maybe you're not communicating your message as clearly as you'd like to, or as you should. And there's an opportunity for you to improve. I think the last piece is just remember there's always an opportunity to improve. There's always an opportunity to iterate. There's always an opportunity to get better at these things. And that's, one of the exciting things about it being a human being. We've got a chance to learn and we've got a chance to improve.
That is a great word, Mike. If you have enjoyed what we've talked about, I encourage you to listen to the past episodes in the series related to tactics, and there's going to be more coming. Mike's always digging for wonderful new topics like this. And Mike also likes when you interact. If you like this episode, reach out and let us know. Mike, how can they get in touch with you?
A couple of ways. We try to make this as easy as possible. One is to go to catalystsale.com. We have a live chat there. You can enter into the live chat, and that information will go right into our Slack environment. And if I'm online, you'll usually get a response pretty quickly. Another way to communicate is via Twitter, Simmons_M, or at Catalyst Sale via Twitter. And you can also find us on LinkedIn. And I'm just Mike Simmons. And if you do a search for Mike Simmons, Catalyst Sale, you'll find me pretty quickly on LinkedIn. So please keep the questions coming. Let us know how you are or what you're working on when it comes to communication and how you're working to improve. Whether that's joining groups like Toastmasters and speaking, or it's going through role play discussions with people inside your organization, or even just testing ideas, maybe even recording conversations with your kids at home to start to see the different way that they interact based on the communication you're delivering. Love to hear more about what you're doing and how you're improving.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike Simmons. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast.